everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the best and worst books I read in 2023. Now, I'm a very big reader. I read 91 books in 2023 and the year before that I read 101, so you know, almost 200 books. I'm a big reader. I kind of know what I like by now. I don't tend to read something that is really bad because I kind of know what I like now, so I tend to pick up books that aren't going to be terrible. However, there was a couple that snuck in last year and I kind of got sucked in because of a title or, you know, TikTok or whatever that I didn't enjoy because it's not something I would normally read. So let's get straight into it, I think. I'm just going to look at my story graph because that's where I track all of my reads and ratings, and I rated 12 books last year as 5 stars. Now, I'm not going to go into all 12, mostly because I'd be here forever. I don't want to be here forever. So I think I'm going to pick out my kind of like highlights of the top ones that I've read. And then also I've got about 5 or so in the kind of 2 stars or less ratings. Again, I'm not going to go through all of those 5, but I am going to pick out, like, I think I've got 3 that I didn't enjoy at all and wanted to kind of touch on. I can't talk about my 5-star books in 2023 without mentioning R.F. Kuang. I read 4 of her books last year and I gave all 4 of them 5 stars. She's a new author to me. I started a buddy read at the start of the year for the Poppy War trilogy, and that's what kind of got me on this like roller coaster of discovery to do with R.F. Kuang, so I think we should start there. I was always interested in these books, but I'm very intimidated them because they are chunky boys. Some of them are like 600 pages and I am not a big book girly. I prefer little books, so I bought them on Kindle. I seem to be able to read longer, chunkier books on Kindle without it being too intimidating, so I did read them all on Kindle and bought them all afterwards because I want to have them on my shelf. But the Poppy War is basically a fantasy history style novel. I don't really like history books just because I don't really like the words. Does that make sense? Like, I get really intimidated by words I don't understand, historical setting, things like that. They're just not for me. I'm interested in them, but as soon as the words go into my brain, they just leave out of the other ear. They don't process, they just kind of go in. But the Poppy War was really interesting because it's a good mix of that. It's very like fantasy based, magic based, with like historical elements kind of thrown in there for some entertainment. We follow Lynne, who is a peasant girl who wants to join the Synigard, which is like a school, a fighting school where they teach you how to strategize, and it's like a military school, strategize, fight. And when she starts connecting with one of her teachers, she realizes that she has something that other people don't. The Poppy War has ravaged the world before, and they're now trying to like protect against that and fight against that and all that kind of jazz. There's a lot of war-based stuff, obviously. But we follow Lynne through her journey as she starts uncovering who she is and helping fight the war with everyone else. Now, these books are very dark. There's a lot of trigger warnings in here, so I would highly recommend you read the trigger warnings before you get started. Like I said, some of it is based on real events that have happened. They are not nice events. But I found these books really enjoyable because they were just so easy to read. Like, I was blasting through some of these in a month. Like 600 pages in a month is pretty good, in my opinion. Like, I would never have done that before. Each book is basically divided into 3 parts. So as part of our buddy read, we would stop after each part and like have a discussion about it and see how we felt about it before moving on to the next one. So I think that really helped encourage me pick these up and actually stick with them. I'm not sure if I would have stuck with them if I was reading them on my own and didn't quite understand some stuff. You can kind of have a chat about it and go, oh, I see where that links to that, and it makes sense. So that really helped with that. I loved these. It made me really appreciate R.F. Kuang as a writer. She's just brilliant at taking you along and making you care about the characters. Like, they're great. I don't really know what else to say about them other than I love them and I gave every single one of them 5 stars. So I highly recommend this book series. And whilst we're still on the R.F. Kuang boat, let's talk about Yellowface. So this was R.F. Kuang's first literary novel rather than fantasy based. I had to pick it up because I enjoyed the Poppy War trilogy so much that I was like, well, I have to keep reading more of her books, right? She did write Babel, or Babel, I don't think Babel really appeals to me that much. Maybe I'll read it one day because I enjoy her writing, but I kind of skipped that one and went straight to Yellowface, so maybe there's something in there. Maybe I'll do a reading vlog of that one at some point and see if I actually like it. If you haven't seen Yellowface, I don't know where you've been. If you're reading this video and you're a book person, where have you been? This has been literally everywhere. But this is about two writer friends. One is crazy successful Netflix series of her books, all that kind of stuff, and the other one is kind of struggling to find her feet as a writer and get the same kind of publicity. They go out for dinner and they go back to Athena, a successful person's apartment, to have dinner, and she chokes to death and dies with June in the apartment with her. That's kind of, yeah, how it starts. And then June steals a manuscript that Athena was writing and hadn't published yet and hadn't shown to her publicist. She ends up publishing it under her own name and getting the success for the book even though it's not hers. There's a lot of discussion about the book industry and appropriation because Athena is Chinese and the book is Chinese and June is not, and she's trying to pass off this book like she is a Chinese person writing about Chinese history. So it's a very interesting novel. I loved it. I gave it 5 stars because she's written the characters so well that personally I got halfway through the book and realised, oh, these things are really horrible that she's doing. And like, she's horrible throughout the whole thing. And it was only halfway through that I was like, oh, this is getting quite horrible. But then I hadn't realised how bad all the other stuff was before that. And going, oh, like, all of it is bad, but my tolerance for the badness, she kind of slowly creeps in, and then you get to a point where like she's gone over the line and you're like, oh, this is bad, but you kind of go, oh shit, all that other stuff was really bad too. And it was just really interesting. As someone that isn't, you know, overly familiar with the book industry and publishing house drama and things like that, like I don't have any awareness of that stuff. I can't really tell here, but I have tabbed it with some quotes that I thought was quite funny, and I generally do that when I really enjoy a book, so I know I can go back and kind of pick out some of my favourite quotes or scenes and be like, oh yeah, that was pretty bad, wasn't it? Yeah, I really enjoyed this book. I would highly recommend picking it up if you want to read something slightly different to what you're used to, or if you want to get into R.F. Kuang but you don't want to go straight in with the really hard-hitting fantasy stuff. I would highly recommend it. Next up, I wanted to talk about possibly my favourite book of 2023. I need to think about which one is my absolute favourite, but this is Cleopatra and Frankenstein by Coco Mellors. This is like a literary fiction romance. It's basically right up my street. You probably don't know me as a reader because I haven't really spoken about books on this channel that much yet, but this is my perfect book. I love literary fiction. I love those kind of plots that doesn't really happen, like nothing happens, but you see a lot of the characters' personality and thoughts and actions, and this is that. It's about a couple that meet in New York. Cleo, or Cleopatra is her nickname. Cleo is a budding artist who's from the UK and she needs a green card to stay in America, and she meets Frank, who is a successful businessman that's older than her, and they fall for each other at a New Year's party, I think, and they end up getting married. But they marry for love, but they also marry because Cleo needs a green card. So it's kind of convenience, but also they do love each other and they are together for most of this book. Spoiler alert. It's about them falling in love and figuring each other out and understanding their friendships and their family. There's just a lot of relationships and friendships in this book, and I really like that. As you can see, I've also tabbed lots of things in here too. Often with these kind of books you also don't really get a kind of character arc or redemption arc for some of them characters, and I felt like this did have some of that, and it kind of rounded the book up quite nicely, which you don't always get with literary fiction, so I felt that that was done quite well in this book and I enjoyed that aspect of it. There's a couple of quotes I wanted to read from this just so you can kind of get an idea of why I liked it so much. They've just got married and they're doing the personal part of the vows, and Frank says to Cleo, "When the darkest parts of you meet the darkest parts of me, it creates light." And I thought that was a really beautiful line. And another quote that I really enjoyed was this one. It says, "You don't stop bullshitting because you get old," she says. "You get old because life's bullshit." Thought that was quite a nice little quote right there, because it's true, isn't it? This book is also great for just learning about other characters. Her friends are just wacky and wild, and not necessarily nice people, which are always interesting to read about. The family dynamics are interesting too, so I related to some of that stuff in there, so I guess that's why I enjoyed it. If you're looking for something that's easy to read but has some interesting characters in it, a bit of a romance and discovering of themselves, I think this is for you. Like, I loved it. I also reviewed this on TikTok, so if you do want like a more in-depth review of this, then you can head over to my TikTok, because that's where I do book reviews. I was looking on the Waterstones app this morning before filming this to just see what's coming in the new year, and Coco Mellors has got another book out next year, so I'm excited to see what that is about, and I'm going to pre-order it. Next up, we have a situational 5 stars. I told you there was some in here, and this is My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. Now, I was in the kind of vibe where I wanted to read something a bit kooky. It was around Halloween, I think, so, you know, Halloween vibes, Exorcism, and I just really enjoyed this. It hit something at the right spot for me. And I think that's really important to understand when I talk about this as a 5 star, because it's not perfect and it's not the best politically correct book, but I think it hit me at a time where I needed something like this, and I think that's important to recognize. So this is about 2 best friends at high school. It's set in the 80s, I think, and they all go to like a beach house and go swimming in the lake, and one of them disappears, and when she reappears, she's acting kind of weird and kind of strange. Something has clearly happened to her in the lake. And it's about her best friend trying to unravel the mystery of why she's acting so strange and helping her, whilst also going through teenage life and home stuff, friend stuff, school stuff, that kind of vibe. And as you can probably predict, it turns out that she's been, what's the word? Taken over by a demon? Whatever the word is for that. She's done that, so she has to try and figure out how to exorcise this demon from her best friend. And obviously no one believes her, parents don't believe her, they just think that their child is going through like a teenage phase and she's acting really weird, but her best friend always believes that something's not right and she needs to help her. So yeah, it was very fun. I mean, look at the cover, it's like meant to be like a VHS cover. It's very nostalgic, it's very certain vibes, and I loved it. I really enjoyed it. It made me read a lot of other Grady Hendrix books which I didn't rate as highly, so it kind of shows me that this was very a situational kind of 5 stars, but I did enjoy it. I grew up reading like Stephen King novels and that kind of stuff, so it kind of like was a bit nostalgic to me. I would recommend reading it. I think it's one of his better novels, so if you're interested in the Grady Hendrix horror thriller series that he has going on, I would say read this one first, because I've read a couple of his other ones now and I think this one's the better of the ones, so read this one first if you're interested. And then I think last but not least of the like highlights of my 5 star reviews of this year, I think we need to talk about The Shadow Cabinet, which, look at this. Look at the vibes. I love these books. This is the 2nd book in the series by Juno Dawson called Her Majesty's Royal Coven. Is that the name of the series? But this is a trilogy, I think. Maybe there's more, I'm not sure. I think it's a trilogy, but this is the 2nd book. I read the 1st book last year and absolutely loved it, and the new one is coming out next year. This is about a coven of witches in the UK that are really powerful and have been kind of living in secret for a long time, and something comes along that kind of makes them all have to kind of band together to tackle this big threat that's happening. There is lots of twists and turns in this. I love all of the characters individually. I listened to the audiobook, which is narrated by Nicola Coughlan, which she stars in Derry Girls, so if you're into Derry Girls you'll probably like the way this is audio narrated. She's really fun at like bringing the characters to life. There's a few main characters and it's obviously very women based or women central, which I really love, because when do you get that these days, really? Let's be honest. It's fun, it's dark, it's silly, it's got battles in it, it's got magic in it, it's got love in it. It's got everything you could possibly want from a fantasy based novel that is based on some funny interpretations of the UK government. Oh yeah, it's based in the UK, by the way. Yeah, The Shadow Cabinet. It's a play on words, right, about the British government. I'm really looking forward to reading the 3rd one this year. I gave the 1st one a 5 stars as well, just FYI. I'm hoping this carries on in that vein and that the 3rd book is equally as beautiful, so I can put them all together on my shelf. So those were all my definite 5 stars, top picks of the year. I really enjoyed all of them. I don't normally read like fantasy based things, and there's a lot of fantasy in there, so maybe I'm in my new fantasy era, who knows. But I also wanted to give an honourable mention, also another fantasy book, funny, to Nettle and Bone by Kingfisher. This was I'm part of a book club. This book was one of the book clubs late in the year, and I haven't really read much of Kingfisher, but I actually really enjoy their books. This is about a sister living in a town where there is like a kingdom and a king and a castle, and her sisters have been betrothed to the prince, so they become king and queen. They keep dying, and she doesn't know why, so she ends up trying to go save her sister basically and go rescue her from the castle, and she needs to do some like magical trials to kind of get the power to go save them. This has a female protagonist, and she's fun and silly and interesting, and she meets a fairy godmother, but it's not a typical godmother. She also meets a companion, and she puts together a little dog made of bones, why it's called Nettle and Bone. It's just really enjoyable. I didn't give it 5 stars. I can't really remember why. I did really enjoy this book and wanted to give it like an honourable mention because it's a standalone. It's not like a series, which is also really useful because I always get sucked into reading series and then I've got like 500 of them on my list and I never quite make it round to it. There is also a chicken that is possessed by a demon. So if you've never heard of that in a book before, that's enough to intrigue you, right, to read this book, so go read this book. And now I guess we have to go on to the not so positive side of the books that I read last year. I'm just gonna get stuck in, and this is probably gonna be really controversial, but I read The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald last year, and I hated it. I don't understand why this book has got so much press over the years. I mean, maybe it was controversial at the time it was written, but like, nothing happens in this book. It's really boring. There's a bunch of random domestic violence in there for no reason. Like, all it is a bunch of people partying. Like, am I missing something? Like, do people love this book because they've watched the film and the film is... I have also not seen the film, just FYI. So, like, is the film interesting and then people go, ooh, I'll go read the book because I enjoyed the film? I don't know. This was crap. Like, I don't like it, and everyone that I've spoken to that has read this book too doesn't like it. So I don't really understand why it's a classic. But I read it because it's a classic and everyone talks about it, and I didn't like it. So there you go. Nothing more to say really about that other than the cover's quite cool. I didn't enjoy this, and I would not recommend reading this. So there you go, there's the first one. The second book is Weird Bleep by Lynne Tillman. I totally got sucked in by the title for this one. I was like, ooh, this sounds right up my street. It's gonna be saucy and spicy and weird and interesting, and it was possibly the most boring book I have ever read. Like, seriously. How many pages is it? It's 108 pages, and it felt like it was 10,000 pages long because I forced myself to get to the end because I was so bored. None of the sex in it is interesting at all. It is not weird. In fact, it is very boring and very straight-laced, so I don't really know what this is meant to be about. It's based in 1988, so I don't know, maybe in the 80s this was meant to be controversial and a bit out there, but I can tell you as someone who's very progressive in 2023, this is not weird. Or even remotely interesting, to be honest. So I gave this 0.5 stars because I don't like being mean and giving it 0 stars, but I would give it 0 stars, let's be honest. Complete waste of £9. Probably gonna give it to the charity shop and hope that someone else finds it interesting, but yeah, I just didn't enjoy this. It wasn't for me, it was very boring. And then the very last book I want to talk about, which is one that I read right at the end of the year because I was like 2 books under my reading goal, and I know we shouldn't do that, but I picked up some very short books to kind of get me over the line, you know? Everyone does that, right? Not just me. And I picked up They by K. Dick. I mean, I was mostly sucked in by the Faber editions because I have a lot of Faber edition books actually, and I just love the covers. There is that. But this is about a future where anything kind of creative or art is being destroyed in the world, and if you are hiding art or stuff like that, you basically get punished. Yeah, there's levels of punishment within that. It's like a dystopian future of a world without creativity, basically. And it follows a few different people through that journey, whether they're part of, you know, hiding something or whether they've decided to give in the art. And I studied history of art at university. I'm very art orientated. I'm really interested in that kind of thing. And this just didn't hit. Like, I thought it'd be really interesting to see like a future where we don't have books and we don't have art and we're not allowed to creatively express ourselves. But it just wasn't really interesting. I think it really missed the mark, and it's a great idea, but they just didn't really do very well with it, which is such a shame because I had high hopes for it, and it sounds like a great premise. It's kind of creepy and it's kind of weird, but it didn't really like connect with me, if you know what I mean. I didn't really understand any of the characters and what their viewpoints were. I didn't really understand why people were doing it, but it was written in 1977, so I guess the concept was quite different and unique and controversial in 1977, and we've had a lot of media about that kind of stuff since then. It is what it is. It got me to my reading goal. Oh well. Those were the 3 kind of books that I really didn't enjoy this year. I mean, I've read some that are mediocre or below average, but these are 3 that really disappointed me and kind of stuck with me in the disappointment. So hopefully you haven't read some of these and they're like your favorite books ever, but if they are, tell me why you love them. Like, have I missed something? Especially with The Great Gatsby. Do you like it? If so, why? Tell me. What am I missing? That was my very quick whistle-stop tour of my favourites and worst books that I read last year. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm hoping to do a lot more book content going forward. As I said at the start, I read a lot of books. I started reviewing them over on TikTok, but I think I'm going to try and do that more on YouTube now, so maybe do like a monthly wrap-up or do a lot more reading vlogs and things like that. So if you enjoyed this, please give it a thumbs up. If you've got any book recommendations that you think I would love, like, please throw them in the comments. Let me know why you love them and I'll try and put them on my reading list. But that was my best and worst books of 2023. I hope you enjoyed this video and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.